On to our next presenter, Raleigh Finlayson, Managing Director of Genesis Minerals Limited. Raleigh is a mining engineer with over 20 years of experience. As most of you know, he was previously MD of Saracen Mineral Holdings and Northern Star Resources. During his 14-year tenure at Saracen, Raleigh was initially COO, responsible for its first operating mine, the Carosue Dam operations. He was promoted to MD in 2013 and responsible for the acquisition and subsequent development of Saracen's second mine, Thunderbox, and subsequently the purchase of 50% of KCGM here in Kalgoorlie from Barrick Gold. Saracen grew from a market cap of $53 million in 2008 to $6 billion in 2021 before the merger with Northern Star. We look forward to hearing more about Raleigh's new venture, Genesis, today. Over to you, Ral. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Also, thank you to Jake. He whispered in my ear on the way past, so I've warmed them up for you. Echo his sentiments, gold's not dead. Gold price is going up. I'm going to believe Jake. 12 years of presenting, Jake, I was just watching the clock. Jake got it within 1 second of the timer, so for what it's worth, you guys can't see that, but that's what you get from 12 years of experience. So I'm going to step you through the Genesis story. So if you don't know who we are or where we are, the map on the right-hand side, so we're about 230 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie in the prolific gold district of Leonora. It has been a massive 12 months for us, and if you keep an eye on that map, Genesis presented for the first time here last year, and our tenement holding at that stage looked like this. At that stage, we had 2 million ounces of gold and resource, 0 reserves and 0 production. Fast forward to today, via 2 accretive M&A transactions, our resource base has grown 7-fold to 15 million ounces, reserves gone from 0 to 3.9 million ounces, production of 120 to 130,000 ounces, with organic growth going to 300,000 ounces. Our balance sheet's strong. We've got $156 million of cash and 0 debt. We have a capable and proven management team with an investor mandate to be able to deliver on our vision. A vision that we set in April last year, and at that stage it looked something like this. Genesis in the centre, add in Dacian, add in a part of St Barbara, and we'll be well on our way to be able to achieve our vision of being the premier Australian gold producer, sustainable, high quality, 300,000 ounces of production. At least that's how we saw it in April 2022. The reality was something a little bit more like this. So if you don't know the Genesis story, here it is in 30 seconds. Genesis 1.0 involved a management transition in February last year. In months later, on the 1st of July last year, we announced the off-market takeover of Dacian, an accretive deal that was going really well, right up to our friends of Kin and Delphi getting involved. They obviously saw it as an accretive deal as well, which got to the point, once we closed that transaction, we formed Genesis 2.0, which hosted the 2 million ounces of Ulysses and an 80% of Dacian. In December last year, we announced quite a funky deal, a demerger of the St Barbara's offshore assets, and then a subsequent merger of the Australian assets with Genesis, which was going to form Hoover House. Really polarising name, as it turns out. People either loved it or hated it. More specifically, I loved it, everyone else hated it. But alas, that's not the reason why we changed the structure. So we moved to a far simpler acquisition of the Leonora assets of St Barbara, which is very pleasing for investors, but subsequently made it very easy for interlopers. And along came Silver Lake at the 11th hour. For the reasons of the synergy value of bringing these 2 assets together, we come here today, Genesis 3.0. What we do next, at the end of the day, will remain consistent to the M&A criteria that we articulated in our vision back in April 22. We will remain in gold, we'll remain in Australia, we'll remain focused in WA and remain focused in Leonora. Everything will be designed around sticking to our vision. Now we have the organic ingredients to be able to achieve that vision. The next step is to try and fill the void to the Aussie leaders. with Newcrest coming off the boards very shortly. The Aussie leaders is Jake, who you just heard from, and Northern Star. And we feel there's a significant opportunity for us to continue to grow this business to fill that gap. From a shareholder point of view, you'll notice in the bottom left-hand corner there, so the sum of UK and North America is around 10% of Genesis ownership at the moment. To give you an idea, the Saracen ownership, that was more like 35 to 40% over the last couple of years. So we expect to see that go up in the coming years. I have not marketed this story offshore at any stage, so we get to go to Denver very shortly. And it's also important to note there is no quants or ETFs on our register, so we'll most likely see entry into the GDX and then GDXJ and potentially GDX in time as well. From a board perspective, led by Tony Kiernan, you saw all the twists and turns of the last 12 months, so massively supportive, and I'm really pleased to have their support through their last 18 months, which has had many twists and turns. And likewise from our supportive shareholder base, so particularly Aussie Super and RCF, who were the cornerstone investors of these transactions. The deal was recut several times, and without their support, categorically this deal would not have been done. Additionally, other ongoing loyal shareholders of Genesis, including Paradise, Ellie Griffiths, Tribeca and the like. From an executive point of view, household names like Morgan Ball, Troy Irvin have been with us since the start of this journey. Kelly Randall has done an outstanding job, not only doing one integration but two during the course of the year. And the three other names there, Matt Nixon, Andrew Francis and Lee Stevens, will be responsible for increasing our production profile from circa 120,000 ounces to 300,000 ounces organically over the course of the future, which will articulate that 5-year plan in March next year. Matt will be responsible for the Leonora operations, newly minted, was up on site last week. Matt previously worked at Leonora Gwalia for 4 years, and prior to that at Jundee, so very experienced. Lee was previously the GM at Carriacadam Thunderbox for us, and also the mining manager at the Super Pit. So highly credentialed, and Andrew Francis will be running tech services over that whole group. But they're not alone. This is a team that we had supporting us from day one. So day one of the transaction was the 1st of July this year. Pleasingly, many of those people on that page are Gwalia employees that had to convert over to Genesis. We had 96% conversion of those employees during the deal, not at the end of the deal. With all the noise that was going on, it was so pleasing to be able to see these people come on the journey with us. A couple of special mentions. So at the end of the day, we've inherited a really good team. So there's obviously some areas of the business that needs change, but other high-performing teams, we've simply had to change a shirt, change some logos, and encourage their can-do attitude to keep driving this business forward. A couple other special mentions. Here's Paul doing his Superman reveal of his Genesis PPE. Pumpy Tim here, that was a brand new uniform at 6 o'clock in the morning, and rebuilt a mono, came out, looked like he hasn't washed for about 6 years. And best on ground goes to Maz. So we had a previous attire PPE, you can see 29 medals there, and thinking and acting like an owner rather than getting new shirt at cost, with a bit of artistic flair, a printer and a glue stick, he's been able to convert that to a Genesis shirt. At the end of the day, they're all on the journey, as I mentioned, 120,000 ounces growing to 300,000 ounces. The first leg of that will be increasing the capacity, getting the full utilisation of the Leonora mill to get us to 200,000 ounces, and I'll step you through that step. And then the restart of Mount Morgans as we bring on Tower Hill to get us to 300,000 ounces per annum. A couple of things that's not included in that run rate. There's a couple of open pits that was part of the original Genesis portfolio, Orient Well and Puzzle, that are not required in that. Bardock Underground, Zoroastrian, particularly 32 metres developed, that was put on hold, which is part of this transaction, and a portfolio of refractory ore bodies as well, which aren't a part of that production portfolio. Moving on to the Leonora mill. So this is a really interesting graph that shows you the last time that mill, so Leonora mill, Gwalia mill, whichever you prefer, the last time that mill was at full capacity was back in 2015. Ironically, when they sold King of the Hills to Saracen, which was subsequently sold on to Red 5. The dashed lines from that point to now, so 8 years, is what I view as being opportunity costs. Opportunity costs because that mill has been run fully manned, fully costed, but without having the advantage of being able to fill that bit of infrastructure. And this is a fundamental reason why this transaction makes lots of sense. Exactly the same as what Jake was talking about, why the Kundana transaction into the Mungari portfolio made a lot of sense for them. So the first addition we've got is the Admiral open pit, which I'll step you through in a minute, and then we start blending in the Ulysses underground. With the increasing grade that goes on with that, and obviously the increased tonnage through the mill, that is our step change from 120,000 ounces to 200,000 ounces from this asset. And we're off to a flying start. So this is what we inherited on the 1st of July this year. So 5,000 tonnes on the ROM pad. And within a month, or only a few days ago, this is what the ROM pad looked like. So we would increase that sevenfold to 35,000 tonnes. The intent of this strategy, and that big pile right next to the crusher there, is actually high grade from underground. So what we're going to do is take the sawtooth out, where not every tonne that comes out of the mine gets immediately milled. We'll be able to take the flex and noise out of our production profile to make sure we've got consistent and reliable growth as we move forward. I mentioned the addition of Admiral. So this is a brand new fleet. So if anyone's been following LinkedIn, Facebook, you would have seen the arrival of our brand new mining fleet. There was a couple of hold our breath moments. So we'd actually bought this fleet 12 months ago, assuming we had somewhere for it to mine and mill. We actually knew that we'd had the transaction settled on the 20th of June, and the fleet arrived 7 days later. So it was very good timing for us. That's it, and this is the first crew arrived on site. So this is on the weekend. So arrived on site, brand new crew, brand new fleet. And this is a shot from yesterday with our first material getting mined out of the Admiral open pit. There's 1.5 million tonnes of ore, which is coming up over the course of the next 2 years. First ore delivery December quarter, it's most likely going to be this quarter. So to have first ore coming ex-pit in the first quarter that we acquired the asset is a fantastic result, and obviously gets us on that run rate quicker to fill that mill. The next really important addition to the portfolio to be able to get that profile up to 200,000 ounces is the addition of the Ulysses underground project. Simply what we're doing here is, you can see in that bottom bullet point there that the mine's been running at about 700,000 to 800,000 tonnes per annum. The previous owners were trying to ramp it up to 1.1, and in doing so added a lot of equipment. What we're doing is running it back to its consistent run rate, and then being able to redeploy some of that equipment down the road at Ulysses. Now if I look through this is the equipment that's currently down the hole. So right now there's 14 trucks running at Gwalia. That's up from about 9. That increased to 14 was on the back of trying to increase the production output to 1.1 million tonnes per annum. 4 boggers, 4 production drills, 4 jumbos, 22 pits of Ansell gear, 42 LVs and 316 people that operate within that mine. What it does is it creates an opportunity. All of that equipment will actually be able to get down to the mine at Ulysses 32 kilometres down the road quicker than it will be able to get to the bottom of the Gwalia mine. So we can take the pressure off the Gwalia mine by putting some equipment across the road and some people redeployment. So we keep the cost base the same, but it's about better utilisation of our equipment. This is why operating synergies are so important. And we're off to a flying start. So we're building stocks, as I mentioned before. In the first month of ownership, we've actually hit every single underground metric, which is phenomenal effort considering this asset's gone through a management transition for its first time in 15 years. Now, there's a famous saying that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. I can categorically tell you that success in this first month is to do with Andy Lindsay and his Genesis team, Paul McCready and the McMahon's team for being able to hit these targets. Mick Finnegan over here, the CEO of McMahon's, probably takes a little bit of the claim for the credit for his inspirational pre-start speeches to the crews. I personally think it's a fear that we bring into Mick when we go to our contract meetings. Now, if you're a McMahon shareholder and you're worried that Mick gets bullied during these meetings, occasionally he gets one back. Just to be sure, no one was injured during the production of this, or no one except Mick, at least anyway. So for me, I'm not about contract bashing. I'd actually much rather be working with our contract partners. But when it comes to interlopers and M&A discussions for another matter. So this is Luke Tonkin, who used to be my boss back in the St Ives days. For what it's worth, and anyone's wondering, I have and still have a lot of respect for Luke as an operator, for what it's worth. And there's Lenny the lounge lizard, his little offsider. I'm not sure which one was more responsible, so they both get to go up there. But we have kissed and made up, and that's the most important thing. So as I said, I still have absolute credit. I'll give this guys a mulligan for having a crack, but at the end of the day, we've kissed and made up, and it's all about what we do next, respectively. Last but not least, I've got 52 seconds. I'm trying to do a joke here. Is a Tower Hill. Now, in my mind, this is the jewel in the crown. Everyone's talked about this transaction about Gwalia. I think this asset is equal, at least, if not better than Gwalia, in my opinion. Maybe biased being an open pit person, but this is a unique asset in the gold space where you've got 1.2 million ounces of gold, 1.8 grams per tonne in a singular deposit, all sitting within a $2,500 pit optimised shell on a granted mining tenure right adjacent to infrastructure in Western Australia. The reserve's only half of the current resource, so look for that to get re-evaluated and increase substantially on the back of two key elements. One, the Genesis Mining Services that I showed you at the start. We're not going to Genesis Mining Services because of Admiral alone. Our eye is to be able to utilise that equipment on this asset. And secondly, the utilisation of the Mount Morgans plant to be able to get lower costs and obviously increase that reserve. The last bullet point there has been a significant amount of collaboration with all the entities in the area, and stakeholder collaboration in this environment is critically important. And I have win-win-win there. It's actually one of these unique situations that every single stakeholder benefits from being able to work together, and we've seen a significant amount of progress in the last month on being able to progress this asset. I can't say much more, but I am looking forward to being able to provide information on how this asset's progressing to be able to get to the point where we can access this deposit. I'm not going to talk much more on it besides saying it's running at 4,000 ounces per vertical metre, which is a significant deposit. And all I want you to do is just run your eye down the right-hand side of this page. So, widths and grades, particularly as you get into sort of stage 4 and 5, of 40 to 50 metres up to 3, 4, 5 grams per tonne. If you think about this asset that comes into development, into production in 2 to 3 years' time with a 7 to 10 year mine life, Jake talks about having long life assets. This is going to be a significant asset coming on stream against a backdrop in the sector, which is probably assets going the different direction. And finally, Jake talked about ESG. For us, the most important thing, being right on the edge of the community in Leonora, is to give back. And our priority number one by a streak is to restore this treasure, both state and nationally, back to its former glory. So this is a state hotel in 1996 when I had the fortune to work at Gwalia. This is what it looks like in 2023. So this is, as I mentioned, our highest priority. And within the first 2 weeks, Andy Lindsay and his team organised a busy bee. So this comes at no cost. It's utilising the people we've got on site. Unfortunately, this hotel had become essentially a tip inside. So the team have been working about clearing that out. And then the next thing will be, we've got lots of tradespeople, skilled people that work within our business. We'll do as much of this restoration as we can internally. Exactly how the Gwalia town site was restored by the town of Leonora. We'll do the exact same thing on this state hotel, and hopefully restore it to something like that. So that's it from me. Just 3 bullet points to leave you. We are 100% focused on Leonora. We have a capital light production growth with all of our infrastructure already in place, and we are absolutely committed to filling that gap. It's not about the next 5 years, it's about the journey for us and filling that gap up to the ASX 100 gold producers. So on that note, thank you very much.
Raoul, well done on navigating that pretty windy road this year. I hope it's a bit straighter for you next year. So well done. Thanks very much. Thank Raoul again.